It's here. We are redefining what it means to sit at the girls' table.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Girls Table. My name's Elon Dickman. I am the founder of the Girls Table, and today we once again have Aidan Gold. He is a GP at Hyperguap. He joined last week. If you guys want to learn more about him, please make sure to go watch the video. Super interesting. He talks about how he got started running different syndicates, running his fund, and the 35 different investments I made. Basically, put his whole net worth into startups. Anyway, Aidan's also my fiance, and basically we had the video. We had so much fun doing it. We both work in, we both run venture funds, and we recently went on a trip around Australia and New Zealand, and we read none the less than Walter Isaacson's book on Elon Musk. I'm almost done. Aidan has about 2 more pages, but he just can't get himself to read it because he doesn't want it to be done. And we both also started our investing journey, investing in SpaceX. And so we had a whole discussion about SpaceX right before our trip. The tender offer came out that SpaceX is raising right around $95. Then it went up to $97 at a $175 billion share valuation. So today we're talking about everything Elon Musk, his 5 different companies that he's somehow running, and then the most recent tender offer, and if we think SpaceX is overvalued or undervalued. So Aidan, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining again. Let's just get right to it. Do you think SpaceX is overvalued or undervalued?
I don't. So first off, it's so interesting because like SpaceX is one of the largest private companies in the world, but the market for it is so robust because so many people want to buy SpaceX shares. So I think you'll never be able to get SpaceX at a price that seems like cheap or fair. And it's always going to feel overvalued because there's going to be so much demand for a company like SpaceX. And so to answer your question, I think it's not overvalued. I think it's probably undervalued because if it executes, there's going to be so few companies in history that are ever going to be able to compete with SpaceX. I mean, what they're doing, they've been working on it for almost like 20 years now. Just people are so far behind. I don't think people realize the scale that SpaceX is operating at and what they've been able to accomplish. What do you think?
I mean, I'm a pure Elon Musk fan, like, especially after reading his, but why are you laughing at me? Okay, anyway, especially after reading his biography, I'm super stoked on everything he's building. The one question I have is like, how is he running 5 companies?
Yeah.
Like, that is crazy to me. We meet with founders every day. They're reading one. Would you even invest in a founder that said, hey, I'm actually running 5 companies?
No, like, unless you're Elon. Like, yeah. But I really don't know how he does it, especially like, I mean, you see it in the book. He's like, sets up his Tesla design like studio right by his like SpaceX factory. So you can go out and meet with his head designer. He maybe will be like doing something for Twitter until late Friday night. And then Saturday morning, he'll fly down for a SpaceX launch to meet with like engineers about like a deadline. Like
he sleeps under his desk. Like
he like doesn't take vacations. He works all the time. He probably knows business better than anyone in the world. I mean, he's the greatest entrepreneur in the history of humanity, no doubt in my mind. And then what's crazy is, given everything that he's accomplished, arguably the next 10 years could make everything he's done previously look small. I mean, he could get us back to the moon. He could create Robo Taxis. He could have robots. He could have a chip in your brain that helps with diseases like or paralysis. I mean, everything that he's doing feels like it's almost like just getting started to the impact that's about to have.
Are you scared at all about Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin, coming in and taking over SpaceX and a lot of the market share that they've been able to acquire?
I mean, first off, it's good to have more space companies, but what Jeff's doing is just nowhere near what SpaceX is doing. I mean, people go to Blue Origin to have work-life balance. People go to SpaceX to go to Mars and to actually be at the frontier of space. They're just fundamentally different engineering organizations at the speed that they operate. And Blue Origin's not going to International Space Station. They're not landing rockets that go all the way up to the orbit and coming back down. Blue Origin's doing very small jumps to like suborbit and coming back down. They're not able to produce rockets at scale. To compare even Blue Origin and SpaceX in the same category would be just a lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm. So what valuation did you invest in SpaceX at?
Around $40 billion.
And if the opportunity came up right now to invest at this next tender offer, would you invest?
It's a good question. I mean, I probably would put some more money in, but it's not something that I'm actively seeking out because I mean, even like a 5x, like $1 trillion would be like incredible. And there needs to be like I think that might happen in like 10 years, but like ideally we're looking for more like 100x in 10 years. So.
I mean, it's crazy. Even about 4 months, maybe even less before this huge tender offer came out, we just invested at $77 a share. Then this came out, now they're raising at 95, maybe 97. The secondary market's trading at over $105 a share minimum because not everybody could get into a tender offer. So they're offering in the secondary market even higher than that. So it's crazy, the demand and the amount of people who messaged me, because I actually also started by investing in your syndicate. Since then, we did our own syndicate. But how many people have asked me if we're going to have any type of ability to get into this tender offer in this next round of funding? So people are like all in.
People want to invest in this round. We've gotten a few notes as well. But it's interesting. Like, I don't know what their exact revenue is right now because they don't publicize it. But I think there was reports of what, like 12 to $15 billion.
I think so, yeah.
And Starlink is really starting to take off, which is like their internet service company. And I think like Starlink has the potential to become like be like Verizon or AT&T and be like the cell provider for like the entire planet because they just spread the whole globe and like their Starlink satellites. So if that takes off, I mean, that could be like a $50 billion revenue business that is just like no one's competing with them. They own the satellites. They have the software. They go right to customers. They don't have to pay for like all the infrastructure these old telecommunications companies built. I mean, that's like that could be $1 trillion business in and of itself, regardless of having all the rockets and everything.
And do you think Elon's actually going to get to Mars? Is this just like a dream that he says, or do you really believe that, like, as he says, kind of like we have to? It's not like, are we going to? It's like we actually have to.
I truly believe he means it when he says we have to. But do I think he's going to get to Mars in the next 10 years? I would say it's unlikely with humans in 10 years or 10 years. Yeah. But after that, I do think it's very likely. I just think that I'd like to see a lot more progress with the moon being developed and regular convoys with Starship going to the moon and practicing living in outer space around Earth, like more space bases, more moon bases that we can really develop our equipment. Because once you go to Mars, I mean, first of all, no one's coming to save you, right? Just like space, but it's 6 months away. So it's just like, it's a lot. And I think there's a lot to learn just around the moon and in space.
So Aidan's actually username when he was growing up was AG Space Raider. He's been obsessed with going to space, astronauts, the moon. He thought he was going to be an astronaut. Maybe he still will be one day. But do you think it's important for NASA to come back into the space?
Well, I think NASA's showing that they're willing to come back into space by supporting private enterprise.
Yeah, by giving the grants.
Yeah.
But I mean, us, because a lot of times we're investing in these private companies that now actually have the technology that our government, isn't actually producing. So do you think it's important for us to really take a step back and maybe look internally and be like, how could the government hire the best people as opposed to just investing now in these private companies?
I mean,
like
the government did that up until SpaceX. Right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Up until like really SpaceX was able to show that, oh, hey, we could actually build our own spacecrafts, go to space, and like we don't need NASA, who wasn't building at the same scale.
Yeah, well, I think you see with private markets that they're actually have to, be profitable and run a company that doesn't just burn money. And so you saw NASA, every time they would launch a rocket, it would blow up after it was used. So it was a one-time use. SpaceX, a private company, it's like, holy shit, we can't just like send rockets up and then not use them again. That'd be like being the airline company. Every time you use an airline, you don't use it anymore. Like after you fly, like that's ridiculous. So I think there's a lot of benefits from private enterprise that are focused on getting costs down, which ultimately save taxpayers money because then they aren't paying for NASA to do expensive things. So I think it's always going to save private enterprise. I think that's going to be a continued trend of lots of companies moving, lots of industries like defense for Anduril, and lots of things. The government's just like, hey, we are too big. The government employs hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, to deal with all these problems. We'd rather delve out contracts for private companies to solve them.
Which I think in turn is more expensive though. Like these private companies are for profit. Like they are making money off of these government contracts. So personally, from an individual, apart from being a SpaceX investor, I think it's important for the government to take a step back. I do think we hire so many people who aren't necessarily doing their jobs that they're supposed to at the right scale, that we should maybe take a step back and maybe work with somebody like an Elon to be able to bring it more in-house, so we're not just going around and actually investing in only private companies, but actually acquiring the technology ourselves as the government.
Yeah, I just think that like the government is not incentivized to keep costs low.
Which is the problem.
Yeah. I mean, look at our debt issue. I mean, a big thing with Anduril's pitch, right, is like cost plus. So actually, a lot of the big prime defense contractors make what the cost to produce it plus. So the more expensive the project is, they get more money in revenue because it's a cost plus like 10% or 15%. So why would they make something for 100 million when they can make it for $1 billion and make more?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like the incentives were completely misaligned, and that actually hurts taxpayers because now the government, instead of having $100 billion military budget, has a $750 billion military budget.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. It hurts it hurts us. Like all these private companies, apart from being an investor, it helps us in technology and the advancement.
But now you have entrepreneurs who step up and end up saving us costs and increase superiority, like Anduril, like SpaceX.
Are they saving us costs? Or if we were actually doing it in-house, that wouldn't be saving us. They just have to learn how to actually be entrepreneurial and hire the best individuals.
Yeah, but it's hard to incentivize people to just build it themselves. I mean, I think this is what you're going to see is like, with China, right, is a very top-down approach from the government in their space program. This is similar to what the U.S. was competing with, Russia in the previous space race. So it'll be interesting. You'll see SpaceX is going to be competing against the Chinese government, and you'll see what works better, private enterprise or, nationalized governments attacking this. And so I guess we'll see.
Yeah. So one thing I want to talk about is the book, because it was obviously so inspiring. Really, I lost Aidan for a couple of days while he was reading the book, and we were in Australia and New Zealand. But one thing I took from it is that Elon has his feet in every little detail. It's like no matter where the company's at, he knows, like if we're talking about Tesla, where the tires are coming from, why they're not rotating correctly. If we're talking about like the paint on it, and he's always looking at ways to cut costs, always has his feet in every single detail. And I just think reading it, it seems obvious. It's like, hey, if Elon came up to me with a pitch deck, of course I would like fucking invest in this entrepreneur. Like he's awesome. He knows what he's doing. But that's not always the case. Like as a VC, it's easy to miss those opportunities. Even from this later stage, where if I was telling all the investors to be like, hey, invest in SpaceX, it's easy not to, apart from the valuation that just like sometimes you just miss it. So when you were reading the book as the VC and putting that hat on, like what did you take away from it that you hope to now really just put into the work that you're doing moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just shows that like Elon's an engineer product guy first, and he's a great marketer, don't get me wrong, but it's just like that guy knows every single detail in the physics and the engineering behind what he's doing. And to me, it's just like you talk to a lot of people who like might not know that, they're not in the weeds. So it's like, we always like to back like engineers who build things and just to remain focused on that and not to get lost in the sauce of like sexy marketing and ideas and savvy business people that know how to raise, but like they're not maybe the builders themselves. And like, I think that's like one thing I really got from like Elon is that he kind of like viewed himself as like a military general, and like with a military general, like that's inspiring, like stay in the back while he sends all of his soldiers like forward and he's just like sees what happened. Like Elon's like, no, that's not inspiring general. That's not how you're going to win battles. He goes out in the field and he goes fighting right alongside all the soldiers. And so that's why you see him like in the field, in the trenches of the engineering team, going through all the kinks, sleeping on the factory floor. Like that's the type of leadership you need to build the types of companies. And so if your CEO is not doing that, then how do you think they're going to win? They're not Elon. And if they're not doing that, then they're probably not going to win.
Yeah, and we both invest in founders that aren't technical, but I think there is something to be said about founders that are technical, that actually understand it, especially if you're building a software, if you're building a car, SpaceX, whatever else he's building, because it's absolutely insane. But it's like he knows every little detail, knows how it connects. And I agree with you. He is willing to really sleep on the floor, but under his desk with everybody else and work harder than everybody else to make this dream come true, which I could say that not everybody feels the same way if they're building a company.
And he's just like, he has such a deep internal belief. Like this is a lot of people, like you'll start to suss out like who really believes that their work is going to be realized in the world. And you can see it in Elon. He's like, no, we are going to get to Mars. We are going to make electric cars. It's not a matter of if, but when. And that type of like belief and figuring and backing it up with like a plan and how to get there, like that's how like change happens. And just that deep belief of what you're doing on this is absolutely critical, and you're going to will it into existence. Like that's the force.
So I guess going back to the main question, like, would you invest in SpaceX given the opportunity? In our last episode, you mentioned you put your whole net worth in. You barely have any right now to go.
Yeah, I don't have too much to invest right now. I think SpaceX is like a little bit like less contrarian. So, I mean, like I said, like say you invest at like 200 bill with all the fees because you probably can't invest directly. You know,
are they going public? Like, will we all? Somebody said to me recently, even when I did the $77, they're like, "You're not investing in this company to make money. You're really investing to be like part of this change and part of the." I'm like, no. Let's just be real here. We're all investing to make money.
I think they maybe could stay private for longer than everyone's thinking, and especially with such a robust private market, like I was saying, like you could just trade your shares to somebody else if you end up holding for 7 years, and that's like what's been happening.
And let's just jump into that. So basically early investors want to get liquidity. And so what they're doing is they're going to some of these secondary markets being like, hey, VCs like us and other ones, would you like to offer LPs the chance to invest? And it's not saying that they don't believe in them, but they've been holding this now for 7 to 10 years and they want some liquidity for it, which is a whole other kind of conversation we could talk about, which is kind of investing in the secondaries and how it's looked at, who's usually selling the shares, because sometimes it could be the founders and how you think about that. And other times it could just be VCs that have been holding forever and want to sell 10%, whatever, of their kind of holdings.
Yeah, but what's interesting is like, God, there's got to be so many secondary transactions for SpaceX, and it's all just convoluted in all this different legal paperwork of layers and layers and SPVs. Like, it's probably just an absolute mess.
Aidan's saying this from experience.
I'm saying this from experience. Yeah, I mean, there's SPVs and SPVs, and you're buying certain chunks, and then you have a certain, like, it's just a mess. And so eventually this thing needs to be productized. I mean, that was always the promise of Card X to be able to do this. But SpaceX is doing it all like on their own platform, which would be interesting if it was on Card X. But
yeah, so for people who are kind of listening right now, they're like, okay, I'm excited about it. If I could get liquidity, I still want to invest. I believe in Elon Musk. You've been watching them for a long time now. What are their main sources of revenue, apart from the amount? Because obviously we don't know that. So that's private information. They obviously have Starlink. They have these NASA contracts. Is there any other revenue streams that you've kind of seen that you're really excited about?
Well, they get contracts from NASA, like you said, but they get lots of other government contracts as well to bring that the U.S. government approves of, to bring other satellites up into orbit. And then companies also pay SpaceX to bring satellites up into orbit. And then Starlink is a huge, like, going to be their cash cow, which is their, satellites that can beam internet down to Earth. That have solar panels that can like spread out and charge themselves in space, which is pretty wild. And yeah, so those are like their main like revenue drivers.
Yeah, and they, correct me if I'm wrong, but like almost like 1 out of every 3 days they sent something up to space.
Yeah,
crazy. Like
the logistics of that alone is just insane.
And the costs and like
and they're getting the cost so low. Like imagine, I mean, their whole thing is I forget what it is for exactly like the cost per.
Don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, not into orbit. But it's just decreased like crazy. And event with Starship coming along, like the costs are going to get even cheaper.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's just go into one other company that Elon's doing right now, Tesla. We were actually just talking about this recently. Personally, no offense to everybody who has a Tesla who's listening, I think they are the worst cars to be a passenger in. Not saying the worst cars to drive. I think obviously they're really high up on the software, but being a passenger in those cars and being somebody who gets car sick, I must say I'm not a fan. As a shareholder, what do you think? Because you were just saying how you wish that you had more.
I mean, what do I think of you not liking me?
No. What do you think about Tesla as a whole?
Oh, I think it's going to be the largest company in the world one day.
He just said that recently, so you're just reading off. What did he say? He said it's going to be
larger than Apple and Aramco.
$11 trillion.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable in the next 10 years.
The crazy part is I used to be like, no, like it's insane. It's obviously a growth stock. They had barely any revenue. Now you walk outside. We used to play a game where basically you'd see a Tesla and it would be like
slug bug.
Yeah, it'd be like so like you'd hit each other, but now they're really everywhere. And that GameStop pretty fast because you really saw Teslas everywhere they went. But the one thing that I took from the book is that like, don't bet against Elon.
Yeah.
If anything, always bet for Elon.
Yeah, always bet for Elon. And I mean, it's just like, I think everything that they've established, like it's crazy to think that they're still just getting started. Like that's what blows my mind. Like the Robo Taxis are fundamentally going to change transportation forever. And that's always been promised. Elon's been saying it's going to be ready next year for like 6 years now. Now it's like a joke. He's like, the Robo Taxis are coming, but they're not. The moment that happens, like the world's forever different. Like when you no longer have to drive and you can just call a taxi for cents that can just get money from solar, like get its battery and charge some solar panels for cents. Like it makes the entire like, Earth more accessible.
And how's that compared to Waymo though? Because we both actually recently drove in a Waymo. It was the coolest experience ever. It felt so futuristic.
So I will say the Waymo experience was better self-driving than Tesla, but it gives itself more of a confined map where a Tesla can take you anywhere. Waymo stays, for now.
I'd say Waymo's just testing and confirming kind of everything and making
for sure. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully it's not just one self-driving company. Like I think that would be a big deal. It was only Tesla.
And then the last thing Elon mentions in his book, it's about Twitter. And he mentioned that basically he wanted to create PayPal as this whole social network.
Yeah.
He now acquired Twitter. He renamed it to X, which was his original goal with PayPal all along. Where do you see Twitter going?
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter is going to be something like you need to be investing in Twitter because it's going to be able to generate you a lot of money in the future. I think it's still not super friendly to creators, but they started doing payouts, which is good. I mean, you get payouts.
Yeah, people made fun of me because I paid for Twitter Blue and got the verification, but then the only way that you could get paid is by actually subscribing. I probably got in like $600, nothing crazy, but
it's tough.
Something.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a lot of engagement, like what, over 3.5 mil or 5 mil or something?
I think you need 5 mil in the last 3 months, but then like I'm getting even more impressions on LinkedIn, but I have no way of actually getting monetization except they're talking about getting monetization.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally like what Elon does is like force people's hands, right? Like that's what he did with EVs. He's like, we're going electric. And everyone's like, no. And now every car company has to go electric. So now he's like, we're going to pay creators better than everyone. So now it's going to like push a lot of these other people to compete on paying creators, and there's going to be a race to just pay people more for your data, your information, what you post. So this is ultimately going to be good for people who post. So yeah, I think X has so much potential as like a social network, news source. It's the global consciousness. So
Aidan's also addicted.
I'm addicted. Actually,
today he really blocked himself off of any social apps on his phone. It's a new year, new us, reading Elon Musk, blocking different like social apps, going on walks, new apartment. In case you can't see, this is different than our last video. So new us, but really exciting. I think we want to just talk about today. We've been having a long conversation about Elon Musk, about SpaceX, about what they're building. Personally, I'm so super excited about them. I actually want to offer our syndicate the opportunity to invest. We're talking about potentially getting some investing opportunities. And I would say, like, if you're looking for a new book to read in this new year, definitely read Walter Isaacson's book on Elon Musk. Now I'm on to Steve Jobs' one that was from a while ago.
If you're a founder and you haven't read Elon Musk's book, I don't know what you're doing. Like, you get a chance to study the best entrepreneur in the world and you're not doing it. Like, I would want every single one of our founders to like read that book. Yeah, that's honestly giving me an idea to like send the book around because it's just like this is what it takes. Yeah, to build like a big company, like
or 5 big companies,
or 5 big companies. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening. Please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, follow us along. If you have any questions, we'll be monitoring the comment section. And Aidan wants to do this weekly. Potentially, we will see how it goes. If you guys like him on, let us know and tune in next week. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Peace.